Hey everyone, Duke Nuka 3D here with another mask, or a couple of masks to review for you guys, and today I have for you the Acme Full Vision Gas Mask Facepiece number 6. Now Acme is a company that most of us know more about the demise rather than their introduction, but the little that I can tell you, and again, forgive me if I get this incorrect, I probably should have checked with Moulage and another guy I know who actually sent me this face piece here, more about the history of Acme, but I can tell you that Acme was founded sometime, we believe sometime between the mid to late 20s and the early 30s. We don't know who founded it in particular, at least I don't. It's potentially a fellow by the name of G.M. Glidden. I could be wrong on that. I'm probably getting his name incorrect anyways, but we don't really know much about their introduction and their early masks. We do know that the face pieces started off with the Acme No.1, which is more or less a loose clone of the Kops, Tissot, and Monroe masks made entirely out of black rubber, similar to the MSA Burrell Kops type, except instead of using a Yablick valve on the front of it, it had a more KTM-styled angle tube assembly, where it was a conjoined inlet and outlet channel. It may or may not have had threadable replaceable lenses. I could be entirely wrong on that. I'm not entirely sure. It also did have a 5-point harness, and the No.1 style facepiece was modified here and there up until the No.3, which we believe is more or less the first commercial gas mask with an electronic voice projection unit. We do know of an example of a No.3 existing in the DDR Adamschutz Gas Mask Museum in Germany. However, attempts to get more information and photos off this mask have so far been fruitless, but we're working on it. But sometime after that, I would say maybe in the early 40s, late 30s, I'd say more in the early 40s, Acme came out with the model No.4 full vision mask, which is basically the pattern they would follow for all of their subsequent masks, where it was, again, a similar 5-point head harness design with the angle tube of the models No.1 through 3. However, the lenses, instead of the round, potentially unthreadable. I don't know if they actually were threaded. We only have like one photo of the number. They probably weren't. I'm probably talking out my ass here, but instead of the round KTM style lenses, it used the semi-triangular sort of elliptical shaped lenses that you see in all subsequent masks that Acme produced. The No.4 lasted a decent while and was also amended as the model No.5 at some point, which was interesting because it was probably one of the first masks Acme produced with its own proprietary design of having a chin-mounted filter. And most of the early Acme masks were attempted to garner a military contract with various countries. They may have been tested by the U.S. military. There are brochures and documents from Argentina about their testing and review of the Acme masks, and what's interesting is the military trials versions have a different type of eyepiece crimping than the normal industrial ones. And sometime after the model No.5 and No.4 series, the model No.6 was devised, which was sort of a weird intermediate between the No.4 and the No.5. Instead of using the conjoined angle tube assembly of the model No.4, it had a threaded inlet-outlet assembly, and like the No.5, it mounted the canister directly on the chin, but did not need two separate outlet valves, and instead combined the best of the No.4 and the No.5 angle tubes. There were several different variations of the No.6 facepiece. Two of the more common ones you will see here, and there really hasn't been all that much changed from the No.4, except perhaps the head harness and the obviously the valve system. But other than that, all the hardware seems to be fairly standard. One thing I should mention about Acme is they were a relatively small company. By the time they were bought out by the Scott Safety Company in the 1970s to 80s, there was only 30 people working at Acme, and yet Acme is probably one of the more culturally significant industrial mask producers in the U.S., and I'll get to that reason in a moment. But anyhow, the No.6 facepiece was probably their more popular product and was used from, I would say, maybe the 1950s into the maybe 90s, I would say, or it was around the 80s or 70s when the No.8 facepiece came about, which was essentially just a model No.6, but this was around the point where Acme was being bought out by the Scott Safety Company, and they would be the facepiece design was more or less similar. However, the lens shape was slightly different. The facepiece configuration and molding was slightly altered, and that's really about it. There was also more accommodations for the speakeasy accessory. You note how I mentioned the model number 3 was one of the first commercial masks to use a voice projection unit, and they sort of held on to that idea for a very long time, with the number 6 boasting an accessory known as the speakeasy, which I'm sure Moulage has made videos on and he can tell you more about that. But anyhow, the speakeasy was probably one of the first commercially, at least commercially successful voice projection units. Granted that early models were not directly attached to the facepiece like a conventional voice projection unit, later models were, and we actually know of the development process of the speakeasy. Well, I don't, but Moulage does, and I'm sure others in the Discord that I'm currently in do, but again, I'm rambling on about that, and there really isn't too much to be said about Acme, other than that probably their last mask, number 8, which again was more of a Scott design, lasted, I would say, probably into the 1990s or so, and that's really about it. Now, this is the most common configuration you will see of an Acme number 6, with the usually the black plastic valve guard assembly and a chin-mounted military-style number 45 canister. Is it number 45? Let me look at it. Actually, no, it's number 101, but I'm sure there was a whole slew of different chin-type military-style canisters, as they would call them, that were issued with these masks. And the reason that this mask is culturally significant is because a huge number of number 6 face pieces were used by law enforcement during the Black Civil Rights Movement here in the U.S. throughout the 1960s and 70s. And it is very common to see in footage and photographs of law enforcement attacking protesters and activists while using the number 6 Acme full vision mask. And enough about that. It wasn't, even though the chin canister military style configuration was the most common, you see other variations. Here we can see another model number 6 here. This is an earlier one where it had the metal valve guard, which I managed to undo because I was disassembling this mask for cleaning. And this, let me tell you, don't undo these. These are about the biggest pain in the ass I've ever experienced. And Moulage says he can get these on no problem, but I personally cannot do them. You can tell this is an earlier one, not only because of the chrome valve assembly guard or valve guard there, but also because of this threaded metallic shank of the valve assembly, whereas the later ones, like on this one, would have used a plastic thread that was closer to the actual valve itself. I'm not entirely sure why they made them this long. I'm willing to bet it was sort of a reconfiguration of the hosed model number 6, where it, instead of a thread, it was a straight shank. And you may have also noticed at this point that the Acme masks were probably one of the only industrial masks to use a male thread on the facepiece, meaning that the female thread, which would be normally delegated to a canister, would be threaded onto the facepiece itself. It's a very peculiar setup, but very interesting how they would how they went about this instead of doing it the normal way. And it sort of makes sense if you really look at it, because you can imagine Acme was a small company and they probably didn't have the abilities to figure out how to make a 25 millimeter female thread in conjunction with this little stem, which would obviously house the outlet valve disc here, which they probably did it that way so that the outlet valve, if it needed to be removed, could be pulled easily over those threads and easily replaced, obviously. You may also notice the little ring on the bottom of the right eyepiece, and that is so to hang the facepiece from a carrying sling if used with a chest canister. And also this model here, which again is, this isn't mine to keep. This is going to be going back to Moulage during his next visit, whenever that happens. This is a very, I don't want to say rare, but very uncommon Acme airline adapter. A small filter cartridge would be in this cast metal case, and then you have a airline adapter with a small airflow regulator on here, and this would be just a continuous air supply instead of breathing through a normal conventional gas mask filter. And also you can get a good view of the interior here, which obviously the full vision really, it's probably one of the earliest examples of a US panoramic mask, if you could sort of call it that. It isn't really, it's sort of a weird intermediate between a twin lens and a panoramic mask design, because these lenses are very big. So much so that it was one of the reasons why the military almost immediately rejected this design, is because these lenses were very prone to breaking and shattering when struck by some blunt force. So also, you may notice the very particularly puny TISO deflectors. This one is missing one of the stamped metal inlet caps. This one has both, but this one is missing one, which will give you a good example of what it would be like. And You can also see the outlet throughout the bottom of the TSO deflector there. A very ingenious but simple design. And you can also notice the very comical place chin here markings on the interior, as if you didn't already know where to put it. And really that's all there is to see. You can see the markings on the forehead, Acme Full Vision Facepiece number 6, and there would have been a Bureau of Mines stamp somewhere on here, but it is not present on this one, but on this one it is, and I will show it off for you in a second. So, moving on to this example, here you can see the typical, again, the more commonly found example of the model number 6 that would typically come in these carriers. This is the Federal Laboratories Incorporated carrier. I don't know if these were issued to this specific company or if just this specific company made these carriers for this mask. And it is a very simple carrier indeed, as it only retains a non-removable shoulder strap with no other external hardware or internal hardware for that matter. It is a completely barren and bare bones carrier. Opening with 2 button type snaps on the top here. I'm not going to bother opening because there really isn't anything to see on the inside at all. So moving on from that, let's get on to the face piece here, which again I've already kind of gone over, but this one's in much better shape, and this is the one that I'm keeping. So you can see how the eyepieces are clamped on here. It's a very nice design. I really like the shape of the lenses. And you can unscrew the canister here on the chin piece of the mask here, and you can also see how the threads on this one are plastic rather than the elongated metal ones on that earlier model. You can see the inside of the canister there with the wire mesh grating holding in the filtering material and the rubber gasket to create a seal. You can see that this canister is unopened, and you can see all the instructions on the canister. Do note that it says military canister, but these were obviously never actually military issue. It just refers to the fact that these are rated for war gases rather than industrial hazards. And this one in particular is only rated for CN and CS tier gases, so just a riot control canister. And that's pretty much all there is to see. Unfortunately, I can't get a clear date on when my example was made. And another thing I should mention is that Acme moved locations several times. They were based out of Chicago, they were based out of Michigan. They moved around a hell of a lot, and I don't exactly know the particular reason why. I'm sure somebody will tell me when they watch this video later. But again, moving on, there really isn't too much else to see with the Acme mask. As you might have noticed, the last one did not have a head harness just because I had removed it. I'm actually going to be sending that one to the man who sent me this particular example. Again, thank you for this. I'll do that trade shortly this weekend. And you can see the back of the head harness, which says Acme Protection Equipment Company. Let me read that some more. Excuse me for bumping the camera. Subsidiary Scott Aviation Corporation, South Haven, Michigan, this side out. So this is a very late Acme number 6 when Scott Aviation or Scott Safety was beginning to buy out the company. Hadn't bought them out entirely yet because they still have the Acme brand name. I should also mention that the face pieces, almost all the face pieces, were designed by a Mr. Thomas O'Leary. I don't know much about him, as with many other people involved in the Acme Corporation, just because there's a very scant amount of information relating to the origins of the company and its development and the people involved within, but I'm sure we'll figure out eventually, and somebody will make a video on it before me. Really not too much else to say about the exterior. I'll take the mask off of the face form here, and you can get a good look at the Bureau of Mines approval stamp on the chin piece, which is fully intact. And there is another Bureau of Mines stamp on the head pad of the head harness, similar markings. And moving on to the interior, again, I don't even have to bring this off camera to revert the harness. It's just such a loose harness. You can see pretty much the same setup, TSO deflectors. There's a few more spokes than on the earlier model for the outlet valve assembly. And as you can see, this one has both of the inlet caps. Still says place chin here, in case you didn't know, you moron. And then also you may notice this circular indentation between the TSO deflectors and the eyepieces, and this is to accommodate the speakeasy voice projection unit, because in order to accommodate these, a hole would have to be punched somewhere in the mask, preferably in that location between the lenses, in order to install it. Very weird idea, but very interesting. And other than that, there's really not too much else to say about these. We do know that these were, again, offered for a wide variety of various industrial roles. Probably one of the rarer models, not counting the early number 1 through number 3 series, is the welder's variation. I can't remember if that uses a number 4 or a number 6 facepiece. I'm pretty sure it was a number 6 facepiece, but there was a variant of some Acme Full Vision mask which had a welder's lens accommodation, and there's only a couple of these floating around in private collections, and a couple of us hope to get our hand, well, not me personally, because I'm not really involved in studying these masks as much as a couple other people like Moulage that I know of, but Yes, we are hoping to get more info on the Welders variant because they are probably one of the rarer variants of the Acme series full vision masks. And that's really all there is to say. If I've missed anything information-wise, I apologize, and I'm sure I could correct it in the description, or you can down in the comments below. That's pretty much all there is to say. I'm Duke with 3D. If you have any comments, questions, corrections, or concerns, drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you all later.